The air was dry and heavy with the smell of dust and gunpowder. The sun glared mercilessly over the outpost, one of those forgotten corners of a battlefield that never made the news. Soldiers had been stationed there for months, morale low, tempers high. Among them was a young female medic named Dr. Lila Hayes. She wasn't supposed to be near combat zones, but shortages of staff had forced her to the front line. Everyone knew her, not for rank or orders, but for the way she treated everyone like a human being, even when war tried to strip that away. The man in charge, however, couldn't have been more different. General Marcus Reddington, decorated, ruthless, and feared. To his soldiers, he was law itself. To his enemies, a ghost of terror. But beneath the medals and military pride was a dangerous flaw: his ego. He didn't like being questioned, not by soldiers, and certainly not by a young woman who refused to follow blind orders. The conflict between them began over something small, or so it seemed. A wounded enemy combatant had been captured during a patrol. He was bleeding out, unarmed, barely conscious. General Reddington ordered the soldiers to leave him. Not worth the bandages, he had said. But Lila couldn't walk away. She saw a dying man, not a nameless enemy. She rushed to his side, pressing gauze into the wound, ignoring the glare of the general. "Medic!" Reddington barked. "Step away from him. That's an order." Lila didn't even look up. "With respect, sir, if I don't stop the bleeding now, he'll die in minutes." "That's the point," the general said coldly. "He's the enemy. He'd do worse to you if he had the chance." "Maybe," she whispered, "but that doesn't make me like him. It makes me better." The soldiers froze. No one talked to Reddington like that. His jaw tightened, eyes burning with fury. But Lila's hands didn't shake. Her focus was on saving life, not defending herself. When she finally stabilized the prisoner, she stood and saluted quietly. The general said nothing. He just turned and walked away, his silence more dangerous than his words. That night, whispers spread across the camp. Some called her brave. Others called her foolish. Reddington's pride had been wounded, and everyone knew he wouldn't let that go. The next morning, Lila was summoned to his tent. He stood there, gun on the table, reports scattered across maps of battle lines. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said flatly. "I followed my oath," she replied. "You followed your arrogance," he snapped. "You embarrassed me in front of my men. You think because you wear that red cross, you're above the chain of command." Lila took a deep breath. "No, sir. I think because I wear this cross, I remember what humanity means. Sometimes you forget that." The silence that followed was suffocating. The general's hand twitched near the weapon. She could see it in his eyes. His rage was boiling over. Then, without warning, he grabbed the pistol, pointed it at her chest, and pulled the trigger point one shot. Then another, and another. The camp erupted in chaos. Soldiers ran toward the tent, some shouting, some too afraid to move. Lila stumbled back, falling to the ground, clutching her side as blood soaked her uniform. 5 shots rang out in total. Each one tore through the air like thunder. But somehow, impossibly, none of them were fatal. When the smoke cleared, she was lying on the ground, bleeding but alive. The general stood frozen, his weapon trembling. For a moment, even he couldn't understand what he'd done. 2 soldiers burst into the tent, rifles raised. "Sir, what happened?" one shouted. Reddington's voice faltered. She disobeyed." But before he could finish, Lila coughed, her voice weak but clear. "He shot me because I saved someone." That sentence echoed through the camp. A medic, unarmed, shot by her own commanding officer for saving a life. The military police arrived hours later. They found a pistol, still warm, and 5 shell casings near her stretcher. Reddington tried to justify himself, said she threatened him, that she was unstable. But the soldiers who had seen her every day knew better. They stood behind her, one by one, refusing to back the general's lie. The investigation that followed was brutal. For days, the camp was under lockdown. Reddington's authority crumbled as witnesses stepped forward. Even those who once feared him spoke out. It wasn't just about Lila anymore. It was about every cruel command, Every unnecessary punishment, every time he had treated soldiers like disposable tools instead of people. Lila survived, though she carried 5 scars that would never fade. When she awoke in the hospital, her first words weren't of anger. "Did the soldier make it?" she whispered. The nurse beside her nodded. "Yes, he's alive because of you." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. Then it was worth it. A week later, as the sun set over the base, a convoy arrived. High-ranking officials, reporters, and medics lined the walkway. The general was brought out in handcuffs, his medals stripped from his chest. Cameras flashed as he was escorted past the very medic he had tried to kill. She sat in a wheelchair, pale but upright, watching silently. That he paused as their eyes met. For the first time, he looked small, broken. "You should have died," he muttered. She smiled faintly. "That's the difference between you and me, General. I don't kill to prove I'm strong. I live to prove you're wrong." The crowd went silent. That one sentence would echo across the entire military network in the days to come. General Reddington was dismissed, dishonorably discharged, and imprisoned for attempted murder. Lila, meanwhile, became a symbol of courage, not for fighting battles, but for refusing to let hate destroy her humanity. When she returned home months later, hundreds of soldiers, men and women she had never met, stood waiting at the airport. They saluted her as she stepped out, her uniform gleaming with a simple medal of valor pinned to her chest. Not for killing, for saving. And even though her body still carried the pain of those 5 bullets, she never regretted a moment. She went back to work as a field medic, traveling to war zones others were too afraid to go. Every time she stitched a wound or calmed a frightened soldier, she remembered that night, and how compassion had nearly cost her life, but also changed everything to this day. They say the legend of the unarmed hero still circulates in training camps, a story told to remind recruits what true strength looks like. Some call her a miracle, others call her a martyr, but those who knew her best call her exactly what she was, a healer with the heart of a warrior. And that's her story. A story that reminds us all that standing for what's right often comes at a price, but it's a price worth paying. Because justice isn't always delivered by power. Sometimes it's delivered by the wounded, the compassionate, and the brave. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe to Grow for Justice, where we share stories that honor courage, expose truth, and give voice to those who stand tall even when the world tries to silence them. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Let's see how far justice travels.